Present yourself in that manner, doing what I can, but you were not
That's really weird.
Actually, I need 2 more.
Hey, Joy, do me a favor, sit down in one of those chairs. I'm just saying, with the projector on you.
Yeah, it's gonna go off. It'll go off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it definitely would.
Testing, testing, 1, 2. All right.
All my panelists, if y'all don't mind coming on that side of the room. When we call your names, we get easier transition to come on in. Sit down once we want to pull up the screen and all that good stuff.
If y'all mind just watch your names, I can make sure that we have time that you understand you should. That way, just everything. It's spoken by the style, especially when you're not going out.
Yeah. Y'all hear that?
Yeah, I can. But it made me speak this stuff out.
Testing, testing, 1, 2. Testing, testing, 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. I hear that just a little bit. Y'all hear that? Testing, testing, 1, 2.
I'm trying to see what's the culprit.
Okay.
The little hum went away. Testing, testing, 1, 2. This better? Okay.
early life. What so proudly beheld at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, or the rivers we watched were so gallantly streamed, and the rocket's red blade, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave? On the shore, every scene is missing, where the foe's haughty host in great silence composes. What is that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully glows, half concealed, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected and shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, O long day wave, for the land of the free and the home of the brave. And where is that man who so wantonly swore that the havoc of war and battles of the future, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood was washed out, their foul footsteps whoosh. No refuge could save their heritage and slave from the terror of flight and the boom of grave. And the star-spangled banner of triumph doth wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, thus be it ever, when freedom shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed and victory and peace may the heavens rest in place. Praise the power that have made and preserved us as a nation. In comforting us when our cause is just, that this be our mind, and God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave for the land of the free and the home.
All right, greetings. My name is Charles Woods III, and I'm the Education Programs Manager here at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. I want to welcome you to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute on behalf of our President and CEO, Ms. Andrea Taylor. I want to thank you all for being with us tonight for our first part of a two-part series, of a two-part community conversation about the Black image. Part one is about the Black image in the media, and part two is about colorism, colorism in Black fraternities and sororities, which will be next week on Wednesday, February the 27th. So now we want to introduce our panelists. If you could please, panelists, when you come in, sit filling in first closest to me. We have Ms. Melanie Posey, Public Information Officer for the City of Hoover. We have Dr. John Plump, an educator and author. We have Reverend Gwendolyn Webb, Foot Soldiers International and original foot soldier. We have Assistant District Attorney, Ms. Chuantae Brown. And we have Sly King, radio personality with Hot 1077. All right, so how this is gonna work, I will ask a question and we'll give each panelist an opportunity to share their thoughts. And then we'll also take questions from the audience and we'll just keep rolling that way. So I'll start the questioning off. This is a very general question, but I'm really curious to see what you all think. How has the Black image changed over the years in the media? We'll start with Ms. Posey here.
Do you have any time frame in terms of a reference of time? How far back would you start?
I would say from the early 1900s, when the media really increased in portraying blacks in a certain light, all the way up until present day. I know it's a long time, about 100 years or so though.
I would say, obviously, when things first began, in my opinion, that it was certainly more on the negative side, and I think that it was just a reflection of society in general, and just what the thoughts and incorrect portrayals of African Americans were at that time. I would say at some point it became better, but even as we look at things today, I certainly don't think that they are where they should be. And I think that's for various reasons. I think some of that is obviously because of the way that the majority culture may look at us, but I also think that there are some things that we as African Americans have done to perpetuate a negative stereotype and portrayal of ourselves, which I think is unfortunate. So I guess I would say it started off negative, it got better, and I don't know how I would quantify it or qualify it today. I think that there are certainly more positive portrayals out there today, but it would certainly be nice to see more positive, in my opinion.
Well, I think that when you really trace the origin and the history of the African American in media, you find that it has always been a negative and a pessimistic view from white America perspective, or just from just a general perspective as far as African Americans in the media. But I think if you take it from the beginning point of the 20th century, from 1900 to present, you will find that the image of the African American was put in place for entertainment purposes. But when the African American was put on the stage for entertainment, it was always due to a negative perspective and belief as the way in which the African American should be portrayed. And then, of course, as you continue to grow in media, whether you're talking about the movies, whether you're talking about music, you do begin to see some development and some growth as far as the black image is concerned. So I just think, in answering your question, I think that over a period of time we have seen some growth and some development, but we still have a long way to go. But initially, it started out as being a pessimistic view of African Americans, and the only way we could be able to be in that perspective or in that position would be to be for the entertainment of those that were looking on.
I feel that black media has changed a great deal, simply because now we have a lot of black media, people in the media, those that are representing both sides of the media. I know even in the 60s, I really don't think that the media was fair to us as civil rights, as foot soldiers, nor were they fair to Dr. King and the whole movement. So therefore now, with the media having more black representation, like with Melanie and other individuals, I feel that we get better representation as far as coverage when it comes to things that we're doing as foot soldiers and other people that's bringing about the black movement in society today.
Is he ready for me? You ready for me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to speak from a standpoint on when the news gets coverage on crime, because that's something that personally affects me, being that I'm a prosecutor. And what I see is it's still negative, the way the media portrays us, even if we are victims of a crime. The picture they may show, even if the young man or young woman, they could put up a picture of them in a cap and gown. They can put up a picture of them in a military uniform, but they're not going to find that picture. They're going to find a picture of them possibly with a gun in their hand, or anything to try to change how we as a whole view that person. For example, I was sitting here trying to think of this man's name, but It was a white male that not only killed his wife, but he killed his 2 daughters and stuffed them in an oil tank. The picture they put up of this man was a family portrait of him smiling with his wife and his kids, and they tried to say, oh, he has some mental issues or things of that nature. But when it's us, it's a totally different story. So yes, I thank God that we as Black people, like Ms. Gwen said, we're able to a lot of times control our narrative. We're able to, you know, put up certain pictures of ourselves and control what people are saying about us. We have things such as Black Girls Rock, Black Girls Magic, things of that nature, where we're able to, you know, show, hey, this is what we're doing as well. But a lot of times the media covers, CNN, Fox, they're going to still report us in a certain way and try to have us depicted in a certain way, especially when it comes to reporting crime. I see that a lot.
So before you talk, Sly, I want to slide in there because your statement prompted another question that I was already thinking about. I was going to ask it next anyway, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it in. I'm going to let you start, Sly. So is the image of criminality still associated with the Black image? And just your own personal views on that. Go ahead, start, Sly, and then we'll come back this way.
Yeah, you know, for me, I think what I was thinking about was the terminology that's used so often in media as it relates to when we commit a crime and somebody that's white commits a crime. It's, we're thugs, we're this, we're that, versus it being said in the same type of crime, 2 different colors, but we're depicted in a different way. And a lot of it is somewhat, not so much imagery, a lot of times it's verbiage, it's words that are used and how we're described. And so when you listen to it without even watching, you automatically know we're talking about a Black person, we're talking about somebody that they've already depicted, that's a thug, that's this, that's that. And so I think we have a face where we're in a situation, especially in this time and day and age, where the depiction of how we're presented, especially in the media, from terminology to, as you mentioned, about how the imagery looks, that has shifted to a point where it automatically presumes guilty. Yeah. Without even really dictating exactly what it is. And so without you giving a chance to even speak up, although we have great representation from people trying to speak out, but when it gets into the point that the media has control of the image of the person, at that point it automatically assumes guilt or assumes a certain narrative, which still is unfair, and we're still dealing with that today.
District Attorney, could you kind of speak on that?
I agree 100%. Something he said brought this to mind. Black people, we do not receive the benefit of the doubt. You know, when something happens and a Black person is involved, like he said, that headline is going to be totally different versus when our counterparts do the exact same action. The headline is going to say, father of 3, you know, something, 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 versus this thug, X, Y, and Z. So we just do not receive the benefit of the doubt as far as the headline, as far as the imagery. We just do not receive it. And I see it so much, being that I'm a district attorney, so I'm always looking at AL.com and seeing how it's reported, you know, this crime that happened versus this crime that happened. You know, I see it a lot. Now,
this is just a sidebar, but do you think that has a bearing on how Blacks are prosecuted in the justice system? Like how they're portrayed in the media? Does that kind of shroud or cloud how people think when they're bringing down judgment? In your own opinion, I know it's kind of a crazy question.
No, it's not a crazy question. Well, when cases go to trial, the judge always informs them to not look at the news and not look at the social media. But hey, who knows what they do when they go home? But they're instructed not to do so. But I definitely think a lot of times, I know y'all have heard it where they say this case is tried in the media. Yeah. You will see that a lot. It's tried in this case it's not tried in the courtroom, it was tried in the media. Like, we already thought he was guilty before he even stepped foot inside of a courtroom.
Ms. Webb, you have any comments about Black image and criminality?
Well, naturally I do, being a former policeman. And you can tell by the way the media let's say present it. Sure. You can tell that whether or not you can even tell what color the victim was or is by the way it is presented. But I expect more from my people that's behind the camera and doing the writing in the media to really explain it the way it should be explained, but sometimes I really get upset the way they write it up and explain it as well.
Well, one thing I want to say is the fact that we all understand that when we're talking about criminality within the black image, we understand that a lot of time those views and values are going to be distorted. Yeah. But we have to do a better job as African Americans to be able to sell our own story and create our own commentary and narrative about what actually is occurring from a realistic perspective in our communities, in our homes, within the media. And when we do that and we understand it from a black perspective, even though we might be characterized in the media as a negative image, if we truly understand and know the truth, we can continue to share those values and those perspectives with our people, not necessarily to make it white and black, but we understand that there is a divisio in the United States of America as far as perception of what is black and what is white. And even in some cases, we find African Americans have distorted images as to what an African American looks like or what their image should be when it comes to being portrayed in the media. So I just think that we need to do a better job of acknowledging and being held accountable for how we feel toward our own people, and whatever that positive explanation is or should be, we must be able to articulate it in every area where we can communicate what we are about as a people and what our image is to be. So regardless to what the Caucasian or what corporate America says about us, we already understand the reality more so than the perception.
And I'm glad you said that. I'm gonna segue to another question real quick, and I'm gonna let you start, Ms. Posey. But I'm glad you said it about us controlling our own media. So my question is, how has social media contributed to how blacks are portrayed? Considering that social media is more of an individual, run system, and it has more individual ideas and attitudes that come out in that. So, Ms. Posey, what do you think social media has contributed to how blacks are portrayed in the media?
Well, let me first speak to your prior question, just have 22 years of experience in the media, telling stories, coming from different perspectives, coming straight out of college up until just last month. I can honestly say that in my 22 years, and obviously I can only speak from my perspective, never at any time did I portray any suspect, defendant in any derogatory term. I take journalism very seriously, and it's interesting now that I'm not in journalism. I've told a couple of folks I can actually have a voice now, because for 22 years I did not. Because I took very seriously when I became a reporter, when I became a journalist, my voice, it did not matter. This is what the facts were, and this is how you portrayed it. Whatever I thought, people would ask my opinion all the time, and I just would not give it. Sometimes I would even joke and say, hey, if you want to get together after work, I could tell you, but when I'm on the clock, I don't discuss that. And I can say in 22 years, not one person ever called up and said, hey, remember you said, let's get together after work and do this. I can say that from my experience in the newsrooms in which I was a part of, there was never any sense, in my opinion, that there was a targeted effort to negatively portray African Americans. I can honestly tell you that from the pace of the newsroom, especially toward, I would say, my last 5 years, things were so hectic that unfortunately there was an effort to get things on factually, and I think it came down to, here are the facts, let's go with it. So I can just speak from my personal opinion. Now, would I say that narrative is out there from other media outlets? I think when we talk about media, that can cross the board. As we said, that can cross music, that can cross movies, that can cross news, that can cross local media versus national media. And I think a lot of folks fail to realize that they're two totally different entities in terms of how things are reported, why they're reported certain ways. You'll have a lot of expert opinion or opinion. At the national level that you don't necessarily have, a lot of analysis at the national level that you don't have at the local level. So I think it's important just to keep in mind that when we talk about those things, there's lots of things that come into play, especially when we talk about national versus local television news, which I can speak on just from my experience. Remind me of your second question.
So the second question was, how has social media contributed to how blacks are portrayed?
Ooh. Well, I certainly don't think that it's helped for the most part. And I guess the perspective from social media is that everyone has an opinion and is not afraid to share that opinion. And so I think in some ways it can actually hurt us more than help us more, because I think that everyone feels that their opinion should be heard, should be expressed, and many times I think that can tear down what might be a positive image, unfortunately, just because anyone can say anything at any time about anyone. And so I think that personally, in a lot of ways, it has helped. I think that there are certainly programs and streams that have specifically tried to bring about a positive image. And I think when we talk about controlling our own narrative, social media allows for that in some perspective. But I think that there are other times when it hurts us more than it helps, unfortunately.
So, same question, I just want to kind of add on to it. Do you think that more stereotypes about black people play out more on social media or easier?
Well, I think that from a social media perspective, out of all of the things that we could discuss here this evening, I think social media is one of the areas that we basically self-create. And I think that when you really evaluate and assess the imagery of the African American as it pertains to social media, we are the ones who orchestrate our own position as far as that's concerned. I mean, if I go on my Facebook account, I don't have one white friend. Mostly all of my contacts and connections are people that look just like me. But when I really look at, I'm just using Facebook as an example, because that's probably one of the most popular social media networks that's out there. A lot of times we only use it for entertainment and the sharing of negative information. But the last time I checked, the positives of social media are supposed to be for transformative ideas, networking, and the sharing of optimistic communication. And if we really use social media for what technology was actually created for, I think we'll see a better positive image as far as our people are concerned. And of course, I'm not trying to throw our people under the bus, but I think out of all of the areas that we are articulating tonight, we control our own destiny as far as that is concerned, because social media was created within the time period where segregation and discrimination was not necessarily a part of our society. So since it was not created during a time when things were oppressed for our people, we have an opportunity to be able to share the positive things concerning social media so our people can be seen in a quality light. And if we're seen in a quality light, that means that we can position ourselves a lot better in the media to be respected and be held accountable at the same time.
Now, I want to ask Sly to kind of weigh in on that real quick.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always made the statement they should have never given some of us social media because I think it has, as you mentioned before, uses that we could use in a positive sense. Right. But what ends up happening, you have a negative stereotype that comes in, whether a portrayal of a certain situation that's happened via the media, and then it's already public opinion has already shaped it to whatever it is on social media. And then the conversation ends up steering into a different direction. And so instead of us having a voice in a different way to push it into a different conversation, sometimes we don't do that. It's more so a lot of the times it's used for likes and people to share something and to get the most attention, and not used in that manner. It's more so about the entertainment, it's more so about being seen, it's more so about being flashy instead of using it for that means. So yes, we've had an opportunity to really dictate what we're doing with that, but a lot of times we don't use it for that. And so instead of us creating our own voice, and I mean, we have the ability to go live anytime we want, we have the ability to create groups and talk about what we want, but we refuse to do that. We would rather make conversation about stuff that's irrelevant, that doesn't have any positive light to it, and not using it for that sense. So because of that, we end up just allowing the narrative to be what it is, instead of there are people that are really going out, counteracting that, having these conversations and being healthy and saying, look, this is what it is, right? And so there's too many positive people that have a way of doing that, and I think that's where we miss the opportunity. And so that's what I see a lot, more so than anything else. This medium is very fast growing. It will continue to be a medium of how we use and communicate. Information has changed, and it will continue to evolve, because that's just how we are in a tech society. But with that being the case, we have an ability to really counteract that in what we're doing and how we present ourselves.
Yeah, I have one little thing to add. Again, going back to my job, and it's unfortunately, a lot of times we're able to solve cases just by going on social media. They telling themselves, and it just saddens me so badly, because I'll see young men and they're holding up guns, they're holding up money and drugs, and it's like this, like you're feeding into the narrative, you're feeding into you're a thug. So when the police officers, when they pull up your profile pic and you're holding up a gun, they're like, oh, we got him. And that just, it really saddens me. It really does. So social media, it can definitely be positive. Sometimes it just all depends on who you follow. If you're following powerful Black people, such as, I follow Oprah, I follow Michelle, just some of the people that I idolize. But for the most part, especially with the younger generation, if you go on their social media, sometimes it's very disheartening to see the imagery that they're putting out there, and they're just feeding into the narrative.
That's what's created.
Yes, ma'am.
Social media now, it could be positive, but is it positive right now? No, it is not. I have wished many days when I was a detective that we could have had social media.
I'm telling you.
I wouldn't have had to
work so hard.
I wouldn't have had to work hard at all. Because with social media now, whereas it should be positive, you see so many negative things, and when you try to enlighten them, some of the individuals on what they're saying and what they're doing with social media, they really don't want to hear it. Old people don't know what you're talking about. And so therefore, you let them go on, and it's like they prosecute themselves.
Yeah, they do.
And so you just let them go on and prosecute themselves and wait for the handcuffs to go on them. You would not want that to happen, but with social media now, that is what is going on.
But that goes back to an earlier point when we talk about the pictures that are put out in regard to certain stories that are told. If I'm doing a story, or if I were doing a story about a crime suspect, and I went on, or even a victim, but I went on there because for the most part you would try to get, and it was not a very comfortable position, but let's say that a young man was shot and killed. Part of the job is trying to speak with that young man's family. And obviously there are many times when the family members don't want to do that. And there are times when they do, and you will ask for pictures. You would be surprised at the pictures that are given to the media, or if pictures aren't given, then we will go to social media and we will find pictures. And the majority of the time, those pictures are very negative. And I can say that I was very selective in which pictures, because there was a certain policy that we were not allowed to show, if there were guns or if there were fingers thrown up in certain positions, we would not show that. We would either crop it out, we would blur it, we were not going to show that on television. But the reality was, those are the types of pictures that we would find. And so, yes, we would use those because we're trying to tell the story. This is the victim or this is the suspect. It's not that we want to show those pictures, but honestly, a lot of times, those are the pictures that will be found.
Real quickly, if you're in the audience and you have questions, there are little pieces of paper for you to write the questions on, and if you wave those up in the air, a BCRI staff member will grab that and bring that to me. We want to bring the community into this conversation, so please, if you have a question, fill out the little card and hold it up, and somebody will get that and bring it to me. Now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. I'm gonna try and go what I think is deep. It may not be deep to y'all, but this is the question that I had. It's one of my personal questions. So, how much does internalized oppression play into how blacks view themselves, and then how does that play out in the media? Does that make sense? If I need to elaborate, let me know.
Define internalized oppression.
So internalized oppression are things like let's say like I am black, but let's say like I don't like my lips or my high cheekbones or how my nose looks or my hair being I like the word nappy, but my hair being woolly or whatever those issues are that we kind of that make us who we are as Black or African people, that we turn around and try and flip it so that we're either emulating someone else or trying to emulate someone else, and we're not being true to ourselves. Like, how does that play out in the media on how Blacks view themselves, and then how we kind of oppress ourselves in that?
Well, I think that question is very deep, and I want to start off with a quote. Being a former history teacher and a 27-year educator, there are two quotes that I want to bring about that I think can validate what you're talking about and what we need to do in order to make sure that this is not a part of our DNA as African Americans. Number one, the oppressed always takes on the mindset of the oppressor. So that means that a lot of times when you see African Americans who have distorted views of imagery or distorted views on how they are perceived to corporate America, a lot of times it's based upon how we have been perceived and what has actually been ingrained in us over a period of time. So it's very important that we increase the self-esteem of our people from birth to present. Now, I want to use a historical law that can help African American people validate their existence here in the United States of America. There's an old historical law that we use whenever we start teaching history, and it says that if you teach history of people of color from 1619 to present, you end up in a ghetto. But if you teach the history and the greatness of people of color thousands of years prior to 1619, they end up being free. So that means that that internalized oppression that you are referring to would not necessarily be a part of who we are if we trace the history and the origin of us prior to 1619. So for those of us who might not understand what 1619 is, that's the year that historians claim that we crossed the Atlantic and became slaves here in America. So in essence, we need to do a better job of truly analyzing who we are as a people prior to even coming to the United States. Then we won't have to worry about how we are perceived in the media. We won't have to worry about how we're being perceived physically or intellectually, because we would already known the truth.
Right.
But the problem is that we don't acknowledge what the truth is, so that's the reason why we're ending up in a ghetto as far as in the mind, instead of really embracing ourselves as being a story of true liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs to be said a lot more.
Right, that's so true. If everyone Google right now Black history, it's going to start at slavery.
Mm-hmm.
If you Google it, I Googled it today, as a matter of fact, just prepping for this panel, and literally it starts at slavery. So they're telling us this is where our history starts. So that's a great point, that we need to go beyond that. I like that.
And that's because we, like you said before, we allow someone else to control our narrative.
Yeah.
So now that we know that, I tell people all the time, our Black history is millennium years old. Mm-hmm. Multiple millenniums. We're the indigenous people of this planet. We're the first people on this planet. To shroud Black history into those 400 years or so that we were on this side of the planet is like a drop in the ocean of what true Black history is. So I just say personally, thank you for making that statement. Yeah, I got to get one of mine. So if thank you. All right. So yes, ma'am. Please, we're still talking about internalized oppression.
One of my individuals that I really admire, and I have admired forever, is Harriet Tubman. But we have to teach our children how to understand what she did at the time that all of this occurred. We need to teach them that. And we need to teach our young people, even today, teach our children how valuable they are. We're not teaching them that. During 1963, we as children, we found our true value, and we utilized that non-violently. And that is what I teach children today, and even teach some parents and grandparents. You need to teach your children their self-value. People are not doing that. They're not even teaching history in schools, not black history, in schools anymore. So therefore, we're responsible for teaching our children. I have to go right back to the documentary because I love it and I'm a part of it. Mighty Times, the Children's March. How many, I ask how adults, mothers, fathers, how many of you have shown your children that documentary that was an Academy Award winning documentary about the children right here in Birmingham, Alabama? How many people have shown that? I continue to show it. I'm invited all over the country to show it and speak on it. But if we would teach our children their self-worth, we would not have some of the problems that we're having today.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, you can continue.
Yeah, that's one of the things for me I think is the biggest glaring issue is if you're never told who you are,
yes,
you'll never understand your true worth and value, and you always listen to the negative side of things that are always told to you, and so that's all you know. And I think the point is we don't have true history being taught. Our children are not being given that, and so we're relying on the school system to come in and do that, when as parents we need to be very intentional on teaching our children the real history, because when they begin to find out who they are, it shapes your thinking, it shapes how you see yourself, it shapes everything about you. And when you begin to see that, everything else in your perspective and how you see things, see yourself, your future changes. But if you consistently hear the same thing over and over again, you're not nothing, you're not about nothing, this is all you can be, this is all you're about, that's all you will portray. And that is one of the biggest issues we have in our community. But if we can fix that, if we can find our way to go back and teach that, watching things like that, helping our children understand the importance of really knowing their history, it changes everything.
Yes. What was the original question?
So the original question was, how much does internalized oppression play into how blacks view themselves, and then how does that play out in the media as well?
Okay.
Care to comment?
I was still thinking. you can go to me.
Okay. So I got a couple questions from the audience that I'm gonna throw in here. Why did or do blacks buy into the thug, trap, stripper narrative?
It's like a get rich quick scheme, you know. That's what it's all about. Instead of, I think in one generation you were raised to, you work hard, you do your 9 to 5, you do your blue collar job, and you know, you raise your children how you can. But now it's like this generation, everybody just wanna do the next thing that's gonna make them rich quick, that's gonna make them viral, you know, what's the trend now? And they don't believe in just putting in that hard work. You know, a lot of times that's why a lot of these kids are out here robbing people. And they don't realize robbery is a minimum of 20 years. And what did you get? A phone? A few $100s, if that? And now you're facing 20 years in prison. But everybody have this mindset like, I want to be rich. I want to do this. I want to do that. You know, and that's why, you know, I believe social media, it is raising our children. Instead of the parents raising their kids, social media is raising them.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Why do blacks buy into this thug, stripper, trap narrative?
Well, I think it's a fight between instant gratification and delayed gratification, as attorney said. And of course, we're going to always choose the quicker and the faster track because it gives us instantaneous happiness or perceived instantaneous happiness. But I think the major problem is the fact that we've allowed hip-hop to define our people. And I use hip-hop because hip-hop deals with culture, it deals with language and verbiage. It deals with dress. It deals with type of cars and automobiles that we prefer to drive. So it covers so many different areas, and you can always tie in the thug life and the stripper life with all of those areas. But I think one of the things we have to do a better job is analyzing hip hop for when it started. And I'm using that angle, I'm coming from that perspective because hip hop started when I was in high school. I started high school in 1981. So that was the infancy of hip hop. And at that time, that music, it was really just strictly music. And it was all about recreation. It was all about having a good time. It was all about going to the park and playing basketball. It didn't have anything to do with the women. It didn't have anything to do with stripping. It didn't have anything to do with thuggism. But over a period of time, we adopted those radical views and we allowed it to be the definition of Black America. So I think one thing that we need to do is maybe put a positive connotation to hip hop. Maybe if we start saying that hip hop stands for high intellectual perfection and high operating performance, then maybe we could get something out of our kids because they realize that that's something to rise to. That's something to elevate to. And when we do a better job with hip hop, I think we can begin to see some positivity and optimism in our people, and then the imagery won't be as toxic as we see it in our society today.
Well, one of the things too that I think that we have to understand about the origination of how a lot of this stuff comes about in the media is you got to understand how it all works, right? Artists have record execs, they have people who push a certain image, and so it's all about the dollar when you get down to it. And it's unfortunate that that is the society we're in now, where the change in the type of music and what it was like and what it's now, especially in the hip hop area. But what's happened is it's all about what money can be made quickly, what artists can make the most money. And so the imagery that's portrayed, that's given to us as people that we see, is because most of these folks a lot of times don't really live that life, you know, and they don't really own a lot of that stuff. It's all about stuff that they're doing for a video, for whatever it is. And we're unfortunately having our children see that and they think, oh, that's it. But you don't see all the other stuff that goes along with it. And so because of that, we have to come back and we have to counteract that. And we have to really talk to them about what it really is all about. Really getting into the conversation, understanding that what you see, we got to get back to the fact that, yes, it is entertainment, right? It's entertainment. It's not something you pattern your life after. Unfortunately, we have children who see that and they think that that's the gold ticket, when that's not how it all works. It's a very cutthroat business, a very dangerous business, but that's not the stuff that they see and that they hear. And so I think that that's where we have to come in. And again, as community and as parents especially, we have to come in and have that conversation with our children. We have to.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too has to do with exposure. It's what they're exposed to. Yeah. And you know, my daughter's here, she's 10. I don't know that she's ever seen a rap video because we just don't watch a lot of hip hop at home. That's not what, you know, what I want her exposed to in terms of negative images of women especially. There are certain other positive images that she is exposed to and can expound upon and comment on and things like that. So I think a lot of it is what we allow our young people to watch. And I can't remember where I heard it or read it, and it's been recently, but what you're exposed to, actually it was my pastor, what you're exposed to, that is what you become, be it positive or negative. And if that is what you're constantly exposing yourself to, then that is what you internalize and that is what you become. And so I think that's a lot of it. If we had other things that we could expose our young people to, and a lot of it is, unfortunately, it's generational. Yeah. Especially as you have younger generations having children, because that's what they know, so they pass it on to their children, who pass it on to their children, and it's just the generational effect of it all. So
I'm glad you all talked about hip hop and some of the other.
I don't mean to break format, but you know,
we can't hear you on the live stream. That's why we had you asking.
Well, the thing is, I think there's some people who want to make comments and not necessarily ask questions. So is there room for that? Because you know, I'm just asking.
We just don't have a mic set up, so it just won't be streamed. So if they want to ask a comment, they can say their comment. I just have to repeat it. Yeah.
Okay.
We can do that if we have people. So we'll leave that open as well. So I'm gonna segue that into. Okay, go ahead, sir.
If we could just backtrack for a minute. I heard some comments, and it seems to. What I'm hearing is that hip hop is a cause for a lot of the ills that plague our community, particularly as it relates to our black boys. I don't necessarily agree with that perspective. I think that it was connotated in a way that would suggest that in a general overall sense, okay? Let's be very clear. There's a fundamental difference between hip hop and trap, right? Trap ain't hip hop. Don't get it twisted. I don't know. You can have a side discussion with this.
We'll have to.
So, because there are a lot of contributing members, personal friends of mine who are early 90s, late 80s hip hop artists, once doing a documentary that's being viewed tonight at the Langston Hughes Library. So I think we have to be very careful about just brandishing hip hop as a cause for. I'm like the general, I'm 57. You know, back in the 79, 80, it wasn't called hip hop. That's what you said, hip hop. That's a coin term. They made it a genre, industries to make money off people. Right? Record sales are not fundamentally dominated by the black community. Let's be clear about that. The highest paid rap.
He wasn't saying that hip hop is the cause of the ills of the black community. We're speaking specifically on the black image, and he was saying that hip hop being a strong influencer on the black image and how blacks are portrayed in the media now. I believe that is true. I mean, it does have a very large, it still has a very large influence on how we dress, how we talk, and all of those things. And that's what Dr. Crump was saying. He's not all the ills of the black community, just some of the image things that we're talking about tonight. Yes, sir.
To piggyback off of what he was saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, there's a difference between the two, and when we in our age look at the younger generation, we have to understand that they realize that there's a difference between the two. But if we don't know the difference between the two, then we can't help them understand which one they should be choosing and why. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Trap music is what's making when you say it's how you dress and how that's on the trap music side. That's not on the hip hop music side. I have a son.
I disagree.
And he's 16. And he listens to a lot of the older music that I listen to. Because in my time, hip hop was more political and community.
We still is.
And so for me and for him, what he listens to is a lot of what I listen to. It was more empowerment. And so that's why I said there's a difference. There's a difference when it comes to...
I'm going to get Sly to comment, but I'm going to comment first.
So there may be a difference in the community fundamental term,
right?
But in the music industry, it's hip hop. I can pull up Billboard right now and it's hip hop. So I'm not disagreeing with the formatics of the difference, but in the music industry, based on urban, AC, based on what's hip hop, based on what's pop, all of that stuff falls under certain categories, and all those artists still fall under hip hop. So that's what the industry has labeled that. Okay, so that's what, when you look at that, and I see it every day, it's labeled in that category. It may be defined differently based on the type of style and what we were used to, what I grew up, what I listened to. I get that. But from the fundamental standpoint, that's how it's broken out. So it's still going to fit under that category, you know, still.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about categories per se. I'm talking about the way it's viewed within the community.
Hip hop is the total umbrella. Yeah. All of that, hip hop is the umbrella. Everything falls up under that. I'm from California. I grew up with gangster rap. It was NWA. It was Ice-T. It was Dogg Pound, Snoop Dogg. All of those. It's still hip hop. It was gangster rap, but that still falls up under the hip hop umbrella. Behind you, I'm sorry.
I hope we're not bringing forward. I hope we're not going to get lost. All this stuff, but a lot of this came about, and I can't blame it on any particular aspect of the genre, but it seemed like to me, I knew where I was when I first heard Rappers Delight on the radio. I'm not too far behind. But it seemed to me that the problem really came about is when
I blame it on the West Coast. But when they made being in a gang, going to jail, all that stuff seemed cool. After we had, I know on this side, we didn't know what a blood or a crip was. We didn't know what a 6-4 was. We didn't know what yanking was. The whole range, everything was different. But it made being in a gang seem cool. But the one movie, I think, there's 2 movies that should have never been made. And that's the original Birth of a Nation for the Radical, for the Klan, and 2, the movie Covers. Because a lot of guys, young black men, didn't know what a blood or a crip was in small town Mississippi. But, you know, and then, well, I'm not from Mississippi, but you know what I'm saying. But what we have is a hijacking of black culture. There's a hijacking of black masculinity, and really the hijacking of black femininity as well. And history is written by the victor. In this case, we didn't win.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
What I was going to say is that, going back to the original question about why do we buy into this image, and nobody on the panel, not throwing anybody in the bus or anybody, has said the reality, the fact is that people see it in their communities. You know what I'm saying? Before hip-hop, there was Frank Lucas, there was Nicky Barnes, drug kingpins, there was prostitution in our community. All this stuff preceded hip-hop. You know, what I do sometimes, I coach in the Smithfield Projects for PAT, okay? So I can go in there, I can teach them how to tie a tie, I can teach them how to use the lessons that they learn from basketball, from life, but at the end of the day, what do they see when I leave? What do they see? Who are their role models when I leave? It's the drug dealer with the nice car, it's the pastor with the nice car. So that has nothing to do with hip-hop.
Right.
That has everything to do with what people see in our communities. You know, Mos Def said a long time ago on a record, he said, people always want to come up to me and ask me, where is hip-hop? Where's hip-hop going? And he said, if you want to know where hip-hop is going, ask yourself, where am I going? Okay? Our pop culture, our hip-hop, our media is just a reflection of everything that we see and everything that we do on a regular basis. You know, and I want to harken back to the whole point about social media. The thing is, social media does a whole lot of good, but human nature is for us to dwell on the negative. We like the drama. We like the love in hip-hop. We love the Housewives of Atlanta, all those stereotypes and everything, but the Black Lives Matter movement was born out of social media. Think about that. That's probably one of the biggest movements since the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, and that was born on social media. Nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about how the fact that social media has pretty much given us a window into what's really happening as it relates to police brutality. You know, because before, we didn't have our phones where we could show what was happening if someone was getting stopped and pulled over by a police officer. Now we have that capability where now those stories can be told. So again, when we start talking about social media images, we really need to talk about the consumer. What does the consumer want to see? Does the consumer want to see those positive stories, those positive images, or does the consumer want to see the drama and the negativity? And I think Melanie can speak to that. So most of the time, the negative stories are going to be the ones that get the most views and likes on Facebook than the heartwarming stories.
So that helps me segue into another question that I had. So when it comes to like black sitcoms and television shows, when I was growing up, the Cosby Show, and I know whatever happened with Bill, we're not going to talk about that, but the Cosby Show was the epitome of a positive television show that held blacks in such a high regard. You had a black doctor married to a black lawyer. They had their children. They had one of the children was in medical school. Like, that was a portrayal that a lot of people in the media said was not real, right? They said that that's not reality for black people across the nation. But the Cosby Show gave us, me personally, it gave me a feel-good kind of show as well. It was comedy, but it also showed what I can aspire to become, right? So how does black sitcoms and television shows portray the black image, and do we need more shows like what the Cosby Show was, A Different World, things of that nature? Miss Posey, please.
I don't know if I'm
I'm a good one to answer this question because I watch a lot of children. I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm trying to think of what I do watch.
You didn't watch The Cosby Show growing up?
No, I definitely watch The Cosby Show. I'm speaking of now because I felt like your question is more now. So let me, I have to honestly think about it. So let me defer to someone else to come back to me.
Dr. Plum, you want to?
Well, one thing that I want to talk about is not necessarily The Cosby Show, because to be honest with you, as much as I respect what The Cosby Show stood for black images, to me it was really strictly entertainment, in my opinion, even though both of the parents had professional jobs and they made a good living. But I want to use the sitcom of the 70s, Good Times. I wrote about that in one of my books that I've written on education, and I talk about the fact that out of all of the sitcoms, as far as black imagery in television is concerned, I felt like Good Times was the greatest exemplar of what black people could use in order to be able to get forward. Number one, the mom and daddy were married. That's a strong issue because that's something that does not exist in America today like it should for black people. I'll give you a few statistics. In the 1930s, over 80% of children came from two-parent households. In 2019, less than 30% of African-American children come from two-parent households. So that means that we start out dysfunctional for whatever reason there may be. But I want to give you an example why Good Times was probably the greatest sitcom ever created as far as imagery of black people concerned. Two, the parents understood their role. The father was the leader and the head of the home, and he was the disciplinarian, and the mother respected him. The mother was a nurturer. She cared for her children. She taught her children. She also assisted with the discipline program. She understood her role. All three of the children were multi-talented, and they all had goals, even though JJ had a flair for comedy, but he still was an aspiring painter, an artist. So he had skill. Thelma was a dancer and wanted to be a doctor. We know that Michael wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. The point that I'm trying to make is the fact that even though they lived in the ghetto, even though they were poor, even though James went from job to job, they still had a sense of love and they still had a sense of family. But if you look at the common black family in the United States of America right now, we don't necessarily have that image like we should. So we need to do a better job of acknowledging imagery on television from a positive standpoint that says that the black family can still be disenfranchised, can still be impoverished, and still have a positive and a quality presentation for our people.
So I'm curious though, so can you expound upon why you think The Cosby Show did not represent that same?
Well, I'm not saying it did not represent that. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I felt like the episodes really were more so about entertainment, more so than actual growth and prosperity from an educational standpoint. I think it was already just understood that they came from an affluent background, and it was just strictly comedy, in my opinion. So that's just the way I looked at that. That's all I was saying.
Anybody else want to comment on it?
What was the original question?
So the original question was, how has black sitcoms and television shows portrayed the black image? And are shows like The Cosby Show, where you show a very positive light of the black experience here in America, are shows like that needed?
I definitely believe they are. You know, growing up, I had The Cosby Show, I had Family Matters, I had Moesha. You know, I had a lot of black shows where, you know, that was my show, where it was black families, and all of them showed the struggles, the dynamics of a black family. But we had that. Nowadays, I don't know what my baby girl is going to look at. I think we have Blackish, which is the show that shows a family, and Grownish, which is like the spin-off of it when she graduated to go to college, just like Denise graduated to go to college on Different World when she left The Cosby Show. But really now, and I'm kind of like Melanie, I don't watch much TV, but those are the only two TV shows, and if y'all can throw some more out, Blackish and Grownish, that shows a group of young black children going to college, or a a television show that shows us mom and dad and children and show the everyday struggles of what we go through. So yeah, I don't know. My baby's gonna have to watch old episodes of Moesha.
You can get the seasons on.
A lot of people talk about it. I used to see the Cosby Show as well, and see a family that was a family that, like the young people say, they really had it going on. But now when you see what is going on, and that family is no longer that kind of family, you see how that family has been the true sense of that family. And you see families now with those kind of things going on. So you have to really decide on what the reality of life is, what we need to start showing our family, the shows that we need to start making. I'm not a TV person either. Mm-hmm. I don't watch a lot of television because, number one, I travel a lot, but also what I do watch is something positive, something I can show the children that is positive, even with my grandchildren. What would you think about the Cosby Show, or what do you think about the Cosby Show now, right now?
So that another question from the audience. So what is the responsibility of African American film directors to present accurate historical images of black people? You know, they're supposed to be doing a movie about Taharka, right? Will Smith is supposed to play Taharka, which was a 25th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh. He was one of the Nubian kings. So what do y'all feel the responsibility of African American film directors to present accurate and historical images of black people?
I think it's very, I'm just gonna say this, and this is something my husband, he has a pet, he refused to watch any movie like 12 Years a Slave or Django, because they have white directors, and he feels like they're continuing to try to throw this on us, like you start off as a slave, you're a slave, you're a slave. So I think it's so important to have African American directors to tell that story, like Dr. Plump was saying, what were we before we were forced into slavery? So I think that's great. I haven't heard of the movie yet that you're talking about, that Will Smith is portraying a king, but we need to see that, because all the white directors are just showing us this is who you are. You know, Roots, all of it, white directors. They're throwing this at us. So my husband, he refuses to watch any movie like, now I do, because I'm a cry. I just love to cry and stuff like that, to watch movies, but my husband refuses to watch any movie like that, and I understand why. So I think it's vital for us to, as black directors, to show who we are, who we was beyond being a slave. Like, we didn't start off as being inferior to you all.
So I'm gonna add something to that. So the original question was, what is the responsibility of African American film directors to present accurate and historical images of black people? That's the initial question. Now, the sidebar question is, how do y'all feel about movies where they portray a white savior for black people in certain movies? For instance, in the movie Hidden Figures, the Kevin Costner character, where he ran out into the hallway and he yanked down the colored sign. That was an event that did not happen historically, but they put it in the movie to kind of portray this white savior image. Another example, I don't know if y'all remember the show, the movie Blade with Wesley Snipes, and his counterpart, his right hand man, I guess you could say sidekick, was the older white guy, and he kind of like came to his rescue on numerous occasions. What do y'all think about that? I know that's not really fully on topic. I'm just kind of curious what y'all think.
Well, I think that you expect that if white directors are the ones who actually are portraying those, that are actually creating those movies. So I think it just goes back to cinema accountability. I think that directors have to be held responsible for researching the great stories of black people, the great stories of people of color, and what we've done and the contributions that we've made into our society. And then when we do that, then we can actually begin to see progress as far as our people are concerned. I'm gonna use music as an example. In Jamaica, we know that reggae music is king and queen in that particular area of the world. Well, there was a Jamaican revolutionary by the name of Paul Bogle, and he was a social and political activist, and he lost his life fighting for social and political change. Well, the group Third World wrote a song called 96 Degrees in the Shade, which was in tribute to the life of Paul Bogle. So I'm using that as an example that that reggae group realized that that Jamaican revolutionary lost his life fighting for social and political change in his native land, and they wrote a song in tribute to that. So that means that movie directors need to do the same thing as far as our people are concerned. And when we start archiving and chronicling our stories, then people will begin to be influenced by that greatness. And then we will be at a level where we can feel good about ourselves as a people, and we can have positive imagery on the big screen.
Yes, ma'am.
What we need to do also is we as a people need to start making movies showing our king and queen ancestry. We are from kings and queens ancestry. Even if we go to the Bible, Moses, his wife, we feel like we need to hide things. Start making movies about our king and queen ancestry. Look at the queens that Queen Esther. Look at all the queens we have biblically. Why don't we start making movies about those? By compiling monies together and say, look, we're gonna make movies and show our king and queen ancestry even from the beginning, in the beginning. And those are things that, you know, I'm a preacher too, so these are things that I like to watch, I like to see. We can talk about all of the hip hop, but what are we doing to educate our children from the beginning up to right now? What are we doing?
Anybody else want to comment on the, I forgot what the question was. On the African American film directors to present accurate historical images of black people? No, great. So we're gonna segue into starting to wrap it up. So the first question I have about, as we come to the end is, and it's going to be a lot, so I want to give everyone an opportunity to speak. So it's really two questions. First question is, how do we increase black self-esteem in the U.S. where everything, it seems, media-wise is against us? And we'll start with that. And then the second question is, how can we overcome how blacks are portrayed in the media, and how can we control our own media narrative? So we're trying to get some solutions to all of the things that we talked about tonight. First question is, how do we increase black self-esteem in the US, where it seems like everything media-wise, and other things, but everything media-wise is against us? And then the last question that we'll end with is, how can we overcome how blacks have been portrayed and are portrayed in the media and control our own media narrative? You want to start?
Well, I think the answer to your first question is it starts at home.
Yeah.
She gets sick of me saying it, but every day I'll tell her she's beautiful. Go ahead, girl, with your bad self. I love to see you sitting there reading. Hug and kiss on her when she can't stand it. I don't care. I'm a hug and kiss on her. What do you want to do? What are you interested in? And if it's something where she may be the only one, I don't downgrade, oh, you can't do that. She wanted to fence. So I enrolled her in a fencing class. I didn't say, black people don't fence. If that's what she's interested in, that's what you do. So I think it starts at home. And if I start at home with her, and she's surrounded by my friends and my family that does that, then she's going to go to school and she's going to encourage her friends, and I see that. And so I think I think both of them start at home, but specifically the first question. The second question again, I'm sorry.
Is excuse me. How can we overcome how blacks have been portrayed in the media and are portrayed in the media, and also control our own media narrative?
Well, I think education is a big part of it. And when I say education, it is, I'm saying encouragement with education. So teaching our children that you can do that. If you know there's a need there, you have the talent to do it. Are you interested in it? If you're interested in it, open up opportunities for them to learn and grow. So I think education has a lot to do with it. But again, I think a lot of that starts at home.
Well, I just want to be solution-oriented when it comes to answering those large questions that you asked. But I think we increase self-esteem in Black America, like Melanie said, by focusing on family, focusing on community, focusing on parenting. You know, it's an acronym that I talk about all the time, which says that parents stands for people who accumulate resilient experiences necessary to succeed children. I want to repeat that. People who accumulate resilient experiences necessary to succeed children. Parents have to really understand their role even more now because of the distorted views in our media, because of the distorted views on what excellence and success and achievement is in Black America. Because we recognize that media is very influential. Social media is very addictive. We all are addicted to it, children as well as adults. So in order to raise the consciousness of our people, we have to do a grander job of focusing on those things that say that I'm gonna feel good about myself, that I'm going to choose empowerment over entertainment. And see, that's very critical, because when we watch television, the first thing we think about is being entertained. We think about being informed later on down the line. But if we're truly trying to actually move to the higher levels, we have to have a higher appreciation for education, a higher appreciation for empowerment. And when we have an appreciation for those type of concepts, we'll be able to overcome some of the issues as far as the self-esteem of our people is concerned. The last thing I want to say is the fact that if we're going to try to create some positivity in social media, we've got to be able to do and give ourselves a history lesson. We got to be able to talk about those people that have come before us that were positive images on the screen. James Earl Jones had a speech impediment, but he's known for being a great speaker. Sidney Poitier, what role he couldn't play. Esther Rolle, when she died, she had millions of dollars that she had donated to HBCUs and had donated to the media to educate our people as far as acting is concerned. Roland Martin, who's a positive presence right now in media, where he goes around to different colleges lecturing and talking about ways in which we can increase the cognition and the greatness in our people. And I just believe that if we can advocate and support optimistic images on TV, we can see ourselves portrayed in a positive light. And the last thing I want to say is that we got to make sure that we stop carbon copying reality television. That's a big problem. I heard the brother in the back say something about love and hip hop New York, love and hip hop Atlanta, and all these other areas. If you look at kids, especially females, and how they dress, it is synonymous with what you see on reality television. So either the children and the ladies are emulating that, or it's a carbon copy of that, but we need to eradicate that from our society.
How do we increase Black self-esteem? That's a great question. That's a question I had to grow up with. Not only being Black in Birmingham, but being Black and dark-skinned. I'm much older than all of you up here. Being Black and dark-skinned right here in Birmingham, Alabama. You were put down by your own people. You couldn't be a majorette. if you were dark-skinned, you could have the hair, you have the figure, but you didn't have the color. There were certain colors that you were told you could not wear. You couldn't wear the reds, you couldn't wear the yellows, you couldn't wear the orange, the bright colors, all of that you could not wear. And so a lot of people try to pretend that they are not aware that these things went on. I am living proof that it happened. So how did my self-esteem, my grandmother would build, was assisted in building it by sitting me down between her legs and dipping a boar bristle brush in some water and getting some pomade oil and putting on the hair and combing through it and saying, "You are a beautiful baby." Not you all right because you are a beautiful baby. But then to get out there and hear others say, "Well, you look all right for a black girl." So the things is, you have to build your own self-esteem as you grow. And look at yourself, look at the woman in the mirror or the man in the mirror. When I was growing up, there were the dark-skinned, good-looking guys and football players. I was a cheerleader, darn good one, but they wouldn't even pay attention to you, you know, because you were dark-skinned. You could be pretty, dark-skinned. So therefore, you have to build your own self-esteem. That's what I've had to do all my life. And you know, you kind of get tired of fighting. But when you look at yourself, now you know what? Now when I look at me, I said, well, you a bad mama jam. You all right. You know, because of the education, getting your education and then having your mother and your father. Oh, I had a bad daddy too. Your father. And then I had an excellent husband of 23 years who looked at me and told me just how beautiful I was, and he didn't even look like me. So therefore, we have got to have an opportunity to build our own self-esteem. Another question you said, how writing our own, we have to write our own truth. Our own truth. Write about the things that we had to go through. Don't try to ignore it. I don't ignore what I had to go through. I embrace it. Even when I went to the police department, the things that I had to go as a second black female cop and going into a white area where I was the only ant in the sugar bowl. I had to embrace who I was. If I may take this time and just say this, going out on my first night and going into this redneck dive on the east side of 10th and 50th, New Spot Lounge, I'll never forget the name of it. And when my partner signaled to let them know that we were coming, and I said, we haven't had a call, why are you turning the light on? But he was the senior man on the car. And we had to go into this redneck dive, and they tuned up. And this is what the song was. I'm an Alabama nigga and I wanna be free. Da 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 da, redneck dive, beers in there, everything. But do you think I allowed that to affect me growing up in Birmingham, Alabama? I jumped up on that stage with that .357 Magnum on my hip and the badge on my chest, and knowing who I am and who I was at that time. I asked him, can I borrow your mic? And when I borrowed the mic, I said, now, let me tell you, all you rednecks out there, this is one Alabama nigga that's free. I's free now. I got this badge on my chest, and I got this .357 on my hip. And for all of you drunken rednecks that think you go drive out of here, I'm calling for paddy wagons right now. The answer to all of this, ladies and gentlemen, we must know who we are and whose we are. We must raise our children in knowing who they are and whose they are. I know I'm a woman of God, born in a Christian home, and that helped me to be a stronger woman. Let's raise our children differently is my final answer to that. raise our children to know who they are.
Amen. Amen. I don't even know how I can follow it. What? I hate for you to repeat the question, but repeat it one more time.
Okay. So how do we increase black self-esteem in the United States, where it seems like everything media-wise is against us? And then the other question, which that question kind of took over. How can we overcome how blacks are portrayed in the media, or have been portrayed in the media, and how can we also control our media narrative?
Well, I think it's all, like the gentleman said, what, as a consumer, what do you look at on social media? I believe it's a lot of great social media outlets that show us in a different light. For instance, on BET, you have Black Girls That Rock, where they bring black women from all over the country and talk about the great things that they're doing out in the community. So it just depends on what you look at, coupled with what you're telling your children at home. Like growing up, my mom instilled in me who I was, so I could look at anything on TV. I could look at Uncle Luke videos, I could look at anything, but that didn't change my path that I was going on. So I think it's important that you know, you can't just blame hip hop for what's going on or what's going on out in the social media, because like Minister Webb, just like Minister Webb said, you know, it just, you have to know who you are. So it's a lot of things out in social media. It's a little girl, her name, she's on Blackish. She's the little girl on Blackish. But she just became like an executive producer for a movie that's coming out. That's the kind of stuff that we need to be showing our little girls. This is what you can be doing, not when you're grown, but what you can be doing now. It's another little girl, when you talk about complexion, she was getting bullied by the color of her skin. Now she's a multi-millionaire because she found it flexing in my complexion. And she talks about how beautiful it is being a dark-skinned girl. So it just depends on what you're looking at in social media, because I believe it's a lot of different outlets that can show us, you know, that black is beautiful. And I honestly think a lot of our counterparts, they want to be us. If you look in social media, their lips are bigger, they're getting tan, they want to have curves. So in social media, what I see, what I look at, it already helps my my self-esteem, because I feel like we wasn't right. Exactly. It all depends on what you're looking at in social media.
Well, I'm coming last to so many great things that were said, and really, as I think about the conversation tonight and even the answer to your question, I think one of the biggest things for me that really stands out to all of this is us having the understanding that there is a high level of accountability that has to come into play. As individuals, as families, as communities, we have to start looking at what we are doing and how can we all benefit from helping one another to be better. And so forth. We have to look at not just depending on other individuals to be the ones to come in and rescue you or save a situation, but how can we come together and work better in those areas? Sometimes I find it very disheartening that sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And that's unfortunate when we should be yielding where we could come together and work together to help one another. We all had a mantra back growing up, remember those days where we were a community, where we worked together to raise children, where when I had a grown adult in my neighborhood say something to me, I wasn't jumping back at him, right? I knew better. You know, I knew better. Now it's the parents jumping on parents for saying something to a child that's acting a fool. You know, so we have to understand there's some accountability that has to come into play. And the perception that I always had growing up and understanding who I was, it gets back to so many things that we've said already. Who are we? Who defines you? Who's speaking into your life? And I think when we can come along the side of those young children that we see that need that positive influence, sure, they may go back to an area that may not be the best situation, but there's things you can say to them that when you plant that seed, you never know what happens. And I've had it happen many a times that sometimes all they needed was positive affirmation. Somebody to believe in them, somebody to tell them they can do it. You know, that's the biggest thing. Like Melanie was saying, my daughter will say certain things and I'll tell her, like, no, you can do that. No, you can, because how her mind is shaped and how her father sees what she can do, it automatically makes her think differently about how she sees herself. And so we have a responsibility as a community, as parents, as individuals, to do those things. As it relates to the social media conversation, it's many different sides to the spectrum. There are positive sides of it, there are negative. There are sides of it that we want the entertainment. There are sides of it that have positive lights that really can be a real great thing that we can see. I think the biggest piece that we have to understand is, as it relates to our narrative and all the things that we do, we have to decide on what it is that we choose to buy into.
Right.
We have to make a choice to say, no, we don't want that. When we decide to say as a community, no, we don't want that. But as long as we keep saying, yeah, we cool with that, we're fine with that, we're fine with the garbage, we're fine with the trash, then that's what they're going to continue to feed you. If we stop watching those shows that don't portray our women in a certain way and all those things that go along with it, then there won't be many of those shows still created. But because we keep fueling that, it keeps being our conversation, it keeps being the things that we say, man, did you see what happened on that show? No, it's garbage. But until we start saying, no, look, Hollywood, we don't want that. When we start saying that, that changes everything. That's how you change it. The biggest thing that we have to understand is the new civil rights movement is economic empowerment.
Yeah.
And until we understand that, the power of economics, when we own things and we have the right to change these things, the things that we talk about to say, well, we need to change this in the media. What do we own? What do we have that is ours, that we purchase? If nobody has watched Killer Mike, Trigger Warning, that's on Netflix, the first episode in itself will change everything about this whole conversation, because it absolutely outlines where, number one, our issue really lies as a community, as people. And so I think that that's where we have to begin to look at that, and a lot of it is internal, but I think we have to work together to make a lot of changes we want to see, and money is power, and when we begin to speak with that, it changes a whole lot. It changes a lot. And so, you know, I thank you all for the conversation. I think it's healthy. It's unfortunate, though, because this is what happens. This is the audience that we get.
Right.
We don't get the audience enough people that we need to have this in front of, because they don't come. Most of you probably are on the verge of understanding where this is and how much it matters to you. But the people that need to hear it never come. They never show up. If I said I was giving away 2,000 pair of Jordans, we'd have 1 billion people. Right. So what matters? It gets into what matters to us. We spend more money than any race of people, and those are the things that matter to us, but we won't change, right? But we got to find out, okay, what really matters? And so that's a big concern, and so that's what really bothers me. I've been to many opportunities to have conversations just like this, and it's been, whether it's been with young men or other situations, and you know the room shows up, it's about this number, and it's disheartening. So that's it, I'm done.
So I want to thank all our panelists for coming out tonight. We're going to start wrapping it up. Please give them a round of applause. A few housekeeping things. If you have your evaluation, please fill that out. One of my associates will pick that up from you. Also grab a flyer off of our table out front. We do have one more community conversation going on next Wednesday, February the 27th, about colorism in black fraternities and sororities. Colorism in black fraternities and sororities. Please let your folks know. Y'all come out to that as well. And we are officially finished. We want to say thank you again for coming out. And we want everyone to be safe on their way home. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, Jackson.
Oh, no.
Sister Gwendolyn Jackson.
Yeah, he go. That's black music right there. That's a class 4 felon.
Oh, you a Mustang?
Yes, Mustang.
Yeah, you need to pay your alumni dues.
Justin going to jail.
How much? I'll pay it.
I know you will.
I sure will. How much is it?
Hey, Justin will be singing "Ha Ha I Love You" in prison. He going to jail.
I don't get why would you lie.
George
That's my only thing I have.
Justin. Yeah, he going to jail.